Arriving at a remote hill, the man gets out with a shovel to dig. When he opens the trunk, a woman breaks free and runs. He chases her into the dark. The scared woman dashes into the woods. She keeps going until she spots a surprise. A residential building. Feeling a mix of relief and disbelief, she jumps the fence. Will she escape? Sang-hoo, a dedicated salaryman, works a diligent 9-to-5 job. Recently, he took a significant step in his life by becoming a homeowner. After a long day at work, Sang-hoo enjoys dinner with his colleagues, who warmly congratulated him on his recent home purchase. As the evening progresses, and perhaps a few too many drinks, they bid each other farewell and head home. Sang-hoo made it to the apartment. He reached for the elevator door. His sudden movement startled his new neighbor. He quickly offered an apology as they both stepped into the elevator. So-yu, the neighbor, inquired if Sang-hoo heard a woman scream. Sang-hoo, slightly tipsy, does not respond, indicating that he hadn't heard anything. The woman made it over the fence, screams desperately for help. Sang-hoo arrives home to find his wife and daughter asleep. He grabs another beer and settles onto the couch. A piercing scream shatters the silence. Sang-hoo rushes to the balcony, only to witness a horrifying scene. A man following a woman and bashes her with a hammer. In shock, Sang-hoo dials the police. He drops the phone. When the light turns on, revealing his wife, who has woken up to get water, the attacker paused. Sang-hoo jumped over to turn off the lights. His wife, mistaking his action for drunken behavior, returns to bed. Sang-hoo heads over to the balcony again. He crouches out of sight, observing the attacker. He looks for his phone on the balcony to call the police, and it's broken. The killer turned around, counting the floor, and walked towards the building. Sang-hoo locks the door and grabs his bat, guarding the entrance. With the coast seemingly clear on the camera, Sang-hoo cautiously retrieved the newspaper. A blooded hand pushes open the door, jolting him awake in a nightmare. As reality sets in, it's 4 a.m. He heads to bed, avoiding the balcony. Meanwhile, the victim, clinging to her last breath, manages to call the police, only for the attacker to return and deliver a final blow. At 7:40 a.m., Soji wakes up to find her husband's bat by the door. As she scolds him, he gazed over the balcony, his eyes drawn to the dry bloodstain in the communal area below. Sang-hoo urges his wife not to join the gathering downstairs. Before heading to work, he grabs the mail. A man rushes into Sang-hoo, startling him. It's Kola, a neighbor with intellectual disabilities who lives in the building with his grandma. Kola collects cardboards to sell. At the very public crime scene, Detective J.Yep learns that no one reported anything last night. Perhaps it was too late. Sang-hoo stands at the attacker's position, peering over to his own unit. Unaware of his expression is caught on camera. At the police station, the team goes over the case. They know that CCTV isn't present in all areas, and the victim isn't a resident. Despite hundreds of residents, there are no witnesses. The police vow to continue investigation. A resident admits to not recalling the night, attributing it to people typically minding their own business. Another neighbor praises the area, claiming it's filled with educated people who will report anything suspicious. However, she's casually taking the grocery cart from the store. While at work, Sang-hoo calls Soo-jin, who's running late to pick up their daughter. He's worried about their safety. Soo-ji, unaware of what her husband witnessed, finds his paranoia slightly absurd. Police Woo-min continues to investigate. Isu, a student, heard screaming around 2 a.m. She was about to look out the balcony when her mom turned off the lights in the living room. Brushing off the detectives, her mom honks the car and drives away. Upon arriving home from work, The community counselors draft a contract urging residents not to assist the police in the murder investigation. They fear public exposure and its effect on the property value. Sang-hoo draws a parallel to neglected safety measures on nearby hills, predicting accidents with heavy rainfall. He refuses to sign, feeling it will make him an accomplice to the murder. Sang-hoo contemplates the event from the balcony. He starts composing an anonymous email to the police but stops midway through, glancing at his family's photo before shutting the computer. Detective J.Ep found his way to the hill, with a caution sign for must-slide risk in the rain. Tire tracks were discovered on the muddy hill where the attack took place. Around 2 a.m., a newspaper delivery man witnessed a man chasing a girl, coinciding with a woman's scream heard by the student. At 4 a.m., police received a silent call from the victim's phone. The victim sustained fatal injuries at 4 a.m. The chief explains that if police were called between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. and failed to intervene, they would have been blamed. Jay responds to the chief's comment. A call would have potentially saved a life. Sang-hoo feels guilty after seeing this information in the news. The household has been receiving random silent calls lately. Sang-hoo notices that their dog, BB, is missing. As the couple searches for BB, the killer watches from above. Detectives uncover the contract urging residents not to assist the police. From the elevator's footage, they identify 3 people present that night. Suji is the only one who opened the door, and detectives confirm that Sang-hoo arrived home around 2 a.m. They conduct a balcony visibility check to determine if the person's face on the balcony can be seen clearly from below. Suji puts up BB's missing flyers with their home phone and information. Sang-hoo decides to take them down. On his way home, he notices a bike following him. Detective J appears and startles Sang-hoo. The man on the bike observes from around the corner. Aware that killers often revisit crime scenes, Jay shows Sang-hoo photos of the scene and asks about a man in black who is not a resident. Major Crimes Unit receives a call and goes after the man reported for stalking the victim earlier that night. Park Seung-tae, who locks the door, but Jay kicks it open, and the chase continues. Seung-tae hides. He receives a call from the dead victim, and the man approaches him from behind. The news reports the killer's death and identification. The police discovers that he was the victim's admirer, with photo of her adorning the walls. Also discovering the weapon, Detective J feels something is off. Only 5% of murder weapons are found in the murderer's home, and those who commit violent crimes usually lack deep emotional connections. Sang-hoo evaluates the murderer's face from an online photo and concludes it is not him. Unit 405, So-young rings the doorbell and shows Sang-hoo that the photo is not the killer. She mentions receiving silent calls and insists Sang-hoo accompany her to the police, fearing to go alone. Sang-hoo denies and urges her to leave. She accidentally left her phone at Sang-hoo's. As So-young heads back down, a man enters the elevator, rushing towards her at the door, and her husband, Hyung-yoon, calls. Sang-hoo returns the phone, catching a glimpse of So-young's corpse covered in white plastic while the murderer cleans the floor. He closes the door quietly, but the damn phone rings again. The killer pushes the door open, and Sang-hoo bolts, dropping So-young's phone. He rushes to security, but no one was there. He questions why he pays for maintenance fees. Trying to use the phone, he realizes the danger. Sujin and their daughter call for him, and the killer stands behind them, watching Sang-hoo's next move. Sang-hoo rushes over. Detective J drives by. Jay asks Sang-hoo to confirm if the dead man was the killer, but Sang-hoo denies any acknowledgement of the event. He screams at Jay instead, insisting the killer is dead and stop harassing everyone, and the real killer vanishes. The Major Crimes Unit celebrates their victory in solving the crime. Meanwhile, Hyung-yoon puts up missing flyers for his wife, So-young, in the apartment elevator, catching Cheng-hoo's attention as he leaves. Hyung-yoon politely asks Cheng-hoo to keep an eye out for his missing wife. At the police station, Jae closely examines CCTV footage to identify the stolen car. His colleague, Woo-min, seems indifferent to So-young's missing person flyer. Jae's frustration boils over as he kicks Woo, reminding him of the potential consequences if things were to go wrong. Chang-hoon walks past the community park where a group of neighbors surrounds Hyung-yoon. Security warns him against posting flyers without permission or a permit. Hyung-yoon explains that his flyers keep getting ripped off. A lady from the community council advises against posting flyers after the murder to prevent embarrassment and safeguard property values. Chang-hoo notices his wife in the crowd and discreetly tries to pull her away. During the commotion, security accidentally knocks over Hyung-yoon's flyers. Soo-jin helps to pick them up and hand them back to Hyung-yoon before he walks away. The council lady directs her attention to Soo-jin, urging her to blend in with the other neighbors. Soo-jin points to Kola, who had agreed to take down the posters for snack, as the counselor's request. Soo-jin continued to stand up for Hyung-yoon, supporting his search for his wife. She grabs Sung-hoo's arm to head home after. Detective Jae and Woo find the stolen car burnt down, but salvage records of its recent destinations, providing a crucial lead for their investigation. They track down all the locations the car has visited around the day of the murder and uncover a house address. Jae warns Woo not to touch the paper wedged between the gate and the wall, noting its peculiar placement. Instead, they plan to investigate the owner's information. Woo trails him for potential evidence, while Jae then shows Cheng-hoo a photo, asking if it's the real killer. Jae mentions 3 possible witnesses showing on the building elevator CCTV: Cheng-hoo, Se-young, and Kola. After hearing this, Cheng-hoo rushes out of the restaurant and looks for Kola. Cheng-hoo encounters Kola, instructing Kola to deny seeing the killing if questioned by the police. He asks Kola if he witnessed a man killing a woman with a hammer. Kola responds affirmatively, describing the man wearing a black hat and being around. Suddenly, a man appears behind them. He attacks and forcefully pushes Cheng-hoo's face to the ground. Detective Jae intervenes, urging Detective Choi to stop. Jae asks Cheng-hoo if the man in the photo is the killer. Cheng-hoo denies and attempts to walk away, but Jae stops him, emphasizing the severity of the crime: a woman brutally murdered with a hammer. Cheng-hoo grabs Jae's collar, accusing the police of falsely arresting someone while the real killer remains at large. He expresses concerns for his family's safety if he reports the true events. Jae mentions that reporting the real killer could lead to finding So-young alive, but Cheng-hoo knows otherwise. Detective Choi informs them that Kola is missing. They search for Kola and Cheng-hoo becomes increasingly worried. Eventually, they find a beer on the ground, leading them to a construction building where Kola lies under a white sheet, his head covered in blood. Cheng-hoo breaks down in tears, holding Kola's hand. Outside of the emergency room, Cheng-hoo questions Jae if he's selfish, confessing his fear of losing everything he holds dear: his wife, daughter, and the apartment he bought with a loan. Cheng-hoo reveals that the woman in the unit below is dead. Returning home, Cheng-hoo appears exhausted, and his wife, Soo-jin, awaits him. Finally opening up to her, Cheng-hoo shocks Soo-jin by not sharing his troubles until now. He explains that he only wanted to protect his family. Cheng-hoo regrets refusing So-young's plea to report to the police together, realizing the consequences of his inaction. At the major crimes unit, the chief slides a photo of the suspect across the table. Cheng-hoo nods in acknowledgement. Detective rushed out of the station and into their vehicles right away. Meanwhile, detectives arrive at the suspect's home. Upon announcing his arrest, the microwave explodes. The force of the explosion sends all the detectives flying and injuring them. Jae regains consciousness and checks on his colleagues, only to see the killer breaking the windows and escaping. Cheng-hoo learns that the killer has escaped. Furious and terrified for his family's safety, Cheng-hoo rushes out of the station. He immediately calls his wife, warning her not to leave the house and to lock the door securely. Jae watched Sang-hoo as he boarded a taxi. He observed a black car making a U-turn. Sang-hoo, feeling extremely frazzled, notices a black car tailing them. As they head back onto the highway, the black car reappears. It's Hyung-young. Hyung-young insisted that killing Sang-hoo will release So-young. Sang-hoo reveals that his wife is dead. Suddenly, a gunshot rings out. It's Detective Jae. Hyung-young explains the killer will make Sang-hoo's life miserable. Sang-hoo takes control of Jae's car. Meanwhile, at Sang-hoo's apartment, the doorbell rings. The man claims to be a police officer. A Soo-jin requested to see his ID and face. He suggests she call the police to confirm his identity. Unable to reach Sang-hoo by the phone, Soo-jin reluctantly opens the door, only to find Detective Choi standing there. He brings in the black bag left by the door. Inside is BB's head. Soo-jin screams and collapses, just as Tae-ho, the killer, lunges at Choi. In a panic, Soo-jin rushes to the bedroom and hides her daughter in the closet. Tae-ho enters the apartment and surveys the scene from the balcony, where the view offers a clear perspective of the ongoing chaos. Tae-ho aggressively smashes the doorknob. Tae-ho kicks the door with such force that it shatters the vanity mirror. Soo-jin strikes him with an iron. He retaliates by pushing Soo-jin to the door. Soo-ji urges her daughter to run. Soo-jin, still conscious on the floor, grabs Tae-ho's hammer. She smashes his knee. Soo-jin then drops the hammer and rushes to find her daughter. Soo-jin, holding Yoon-jin tightly, flees down the emergency exit stairway. Tae-ho hurls the bloody hammer towards them. Sang-hoo finally arrives and rushes towards their home. The area is filled with people. Soo-jin spots a man and calls out for help. She realizes that the security guard has been attacked. Soo-jin, overwhelmed with fear, falls to the ground, urging Yoon-ji to flee. Yoon-jin pleads with Tae-ho to stop. Tae-ho stands before them. Prepare to strike their head with the hammer. Two men emerge from the elevator. Shocking to see him holding a hammer, poised to attack a woman and a child. The younger man questions Tae-ho's actions. Tae-ho appears annoyed as he turns towards them. Soo-jin turns to see a couple standing in the ring. Soo-jin desperately asks for help, and there was no response from anyone. Tae-ho finally decides to leave. Sang-hoo pushes through the door and he apologizes to his family, determined to deal with Tae-ho. Sang-hoo follows Tae-ho into the hill. Caution sign for must-slide risk in the rain. Sang-hoo breaks off the plank. He calls out for Tae-ho on the hill. Tae-ho charges towards Sang-hoo from behind, who manages to block him with the plank. In struggle, Tae-ho strikes Sang-hoo's hand with the hammer, causing him to drop the plank and scream out in pain. Tae-ho forcefully swings Sang-hoo's body, smashing him into the trunk. Tae-ho delivers a final kick to Sang-hoo's head. As rainwater begins to gather and cascade down the hillside rapidly, Sang-hoo unable to rise from the ground. Tae-ho steps on his head, prepare for a final deadly blow. Sang-hoo bites down hard on Tae-ho's arm. Tae-ho rolls to the side, a chunk of his flesh missing from his arm. Sang-hoo spits out the piece he bit off. Tae-ho picking up the hammer again. Sang-hoo grabs onto the nearby sapling. Tae-ho charges at Sang-hoo once more. Sang-hoo pulls the plant's root out of the mud and strikes Tae-ho with it. The tower atop the hill appears on the verge of collapse. A torrent of mud rushing down the hill with incredible force. Sang-hoo and Tae-ho are caught in its path, neither buried or swept away. The forceful mudslide surges down to the residential apartment complex. An eye-like opening appears in the muddy ground. Sang-hoo emerges from it, disoriented. He spots a woman's body nearby and crawls over to check on her, only to discover that she is lifeless. Scattered around Sang-hoo, the hill reveals the body of those who cried injustice. Sang-hoo picks up a rock and approaches Tae-ho, following a trail of flowing blood. Standing over him, Tae-ho's body is impaled by a branch. Disgusted and enraged, Sang-hoo throws the rock aside and walks away. In the hospital, news about Tae-ho's upbringing and his history of killing over 20 people plays in the background. Detective Jae visits Sang-hoo, who asks why Taeho killed so many. Jae responds that there may not be a rational answer. It's like a primal hunger, an urge, reflecting that we live among individuals capable of such madness. Sang-hoon's family finishes packing. Sujin thanks Sang-hoon for prompting the investigation with his actions. On the last night before leaving, Sang-hoon stands where tragedy struck, calling out loudly for help amongst the residents in lit windows. Sang-hoon's piercing cry for help echoed through the stillness, challenging the residents to confront their collective conscience. Will they answer his plea and take actions, or will they allow history to repeat and continue to turn a blind eye? For upcoming content, click like, pound that subscribe, and hit notification. Thank you for watching.